Hello, and welcome. I'm back, still busy, but back on track. So, what better way to ease in than with a basic guide on a new build, one that has been a popular demand for a while and makes use of the new Bloodletter sword. So, let's get right into it. This build is facilitated by the following factors. Number 1, the strength bonus now being 2% per point. Number 2, the plethora of damage sources that Guardians can get from their skill sets and gear. And number 3, the Bloodletter sword itself and its great DOT. So, since the build absolutely requires a +2 to all skills, let's begin with gear. Naturally, the best option for pure damage should mostly be Mythic Seraph pieces with plus damage as their primary affix. However, since Bloodletter is quite slow, attack speed buffs from swordsman gear can be visibly beneficial. Torsos come with 4%, as do the unique gloves Hattori's Teku, then helmets and legs come with 3%. Regular gloves, belts and shoulders come with 1 to 2%, so those can be safely skipped for better options. This option, compared to Seraphs anyway, also comes with the curious trade of lower shields for higher base armor in most cases, so this distinction will be discussed later. The second affix of choice would preferably be all attributes. Single stats may be used, especially strength or stamina, but the build can make use of all 4 stats between feeds and power regeneration. As for a third affix of choice, more stats such as strength or stamina would be great, but one could also go for either bracing or monolithic/colossal, so multipliers for either HP or armor respectively. Again, this specific issue is quite crucial, so it will be discussed later. That general approach aside, notable uniques include Hands of Heaven and Archangel Cincture, due to their added physical damage and damage to demons in the case of hands. Jugulator's Guards are also a fantastic option due to their high increased damage, but of course one always needs to weigh the damage bonus against the benefit of plus stats to both damage and survivability. Lastly, in terms of armor, the helmet must absolutely have a +1 to all skills on top of the aforementioned properties, so it's probably the hardest piece to get, unless of course one goes for Face of the Crusader or Angelic Visage. On to weapons then, the shield option must either be Keeper of the North Star or Merkaba. The +1 to all skills is paramount, so the choice between the two boils down to whether one prefers more base armor or some extra shields and spikes. Personally, I prefer the Merkaba since the armor loss is minimal, while shields and spikes on hit are nice additions. The latter actually provide a great option where Shield Wall and Anchor can be used to challenge many enemies and have them die on one's spikes. The sword then must absolutely be Bloodletter. I've found no other sword that works as well as this one, and it's this choice on which many build choices are based. Divine and Pummeling are the two ideal augments to get on this sword, as they both increase damage, and mods can also follow this pattern. Amusingly, DOT doesn't seem to mind increased damage over elemental damage too much. In terms of rings, Dreadnought's ring can provide useful plus stats, while Fulcrum's scale can provide even more increased damage. As for die kits, Black Knight is always a safe choice. Alternatively, if one goes for Tav, one could consider Cold Steel for added armor. So with gear out of the way, let's discuss the fundamentals of skills. Naturally, the major focus of this build lies in the Retribution tab, so Maxed Sword of Reckoning, Hamper, Anchor, Denounce, and Heavenly Condemnation. The concept of all those skills is of course to increase damage. Sword of Reckoning and Anchor boost damage, while Hamper and Denounce reduce enemy armor. Since this build will be using a shield, I'd highly recommend getting at least 2 points in Shield of Faith and 1 point in Shield Wall as defensive utilities. Lastly, since there will be a need for HP and healing, I choose to max Spiritual Toughness and get a minimum of 1 point in Prayer of Healing. A point in Stampede is also massively useful as a panic button, so one could get it through Archangel Gliders or a ring. So that's pretty much the core of the build. With that out of the way, and assuming one gets a Bloodletter with 3 points in Hamper, that leaves 12 skill points. With feeds covered, one should also have a few attribute points left, and there's also expertises. Now, all those 3 issues, along with optional affixes on gear mentioned before, mix together in one regard. One can maximize damage or boost defense through either HP or armor. Maximizing damage should be pretty straightforward by now, but this build does lack survivability, so boosting defense over offense at this point might be preferable. Now, How one does this is debatable. There's shields, thus Seraph Gear and Merkaba, along with Shield of Faith and Shield Wall, and then there's either HP or Armor. In terms of HP, one can go for plus HP and Stamina on Gear, and then use Aura of Renewal. This aura does scale to one's max HP, so the more HP one has, the better the aura becomes. This essentially makes spending leftover points in Stamina over Strength a bit more worthwhile. Conversely, one can go for more swordsman pieces mentioned before and plus armor on gear, and use the toughness expertise, the cold steel die kit, and keeper to enhance Aura of Defense. While this aura's damage reduction may not be stellar in such builds, it's still some reduction and it's not shut down by poison. Of course, one can mix the two, as I've done in this video, however, focusing on one more may produce even better results. So that's the bulk of the build. In terms of expertises, enhanced strength and stamina should be staple options, but I'm intentionally leaving those 12 skill points and expertises free to be spent as one wishes. For example, in this video I used the last few skill points on auras to max stability and deflection, and then got 1 point in power and the rest in defense. For expertises I got enhanced strength, stamina and willpower, as well as toughness and arcane resolve for defense. Of course, that's not mandatory for this build to work, so one can always make different choices. One can even shave off a few more skill points from, say, Hamper, and get such utilities as Challenge for solo play, or max such auras as Renewal and Defense, and so forth. Lastly, it's also noteworthy that since the build does use a +2 to all skills, one can always use a second set for Challenge specifically. 3 points in Provoke max it, and even 1 point in Challenge suffices for solo play. That's also what I did for this video. I used the cast set for basic PvE, and switched back to the main set when needed. Of course, the opposite can also be done. One could get Challenge with points and keep a second cast set for Denounce, since it's only used on single targets. But be that as it may, there you have it. I do hope you found this video informative, and as always, thank you for watching.